I'm not 100% sure on what you mean by this, but you can have, for the most part, a totally free market, but you also have to factor in that what about the other places that don't give a shit about a free market, right? It's sort of like, I want freedom and I want people around me who want freedom, and we're all cool with all that, but what about the people that you're letting in who don't want freedom? You see the paradox there? So that's, it's like, or a better example would be like, I'm all about private property or personal property and private ownership. I'm all about that. And everybody should be able, but what if you let everybody into the country who doesn't give a shit about any of that? You see the problem, right? It's a paradox. And so what you do is you have borders as a result of that. Borders are what you get when you want to stop wars. Do you understand how that works? Because I get the feeling that most people, even academics, people who are supposedly in the know and study this shit, don't fucking understand why borders exist. Particularly libertarians, for whatever reason, they can't fucking get it through their head. That borders exist because a culture creates a border. It isn't, you don't create a border and then create a culture. It's not how it works. The culture decides, hey, we're going to do our thing over here. We're just going to leave you alone on the other side of the river. You go on the other side of the river, you can do whatever the hell comes into your minds over there, and just, we're just going to stay out of it. No matter how horrible it is, no matter how ridiculous we might find it, no matter how offensive we may find it, we're just going to leave you alone. This is why multiculturalism doesn't actually work. What you end up with is multi-legalism. Okay, that's why it doesn't work. So this is a connected subject, right? And so when you say, okay, well, we want to have this completely free, open marketplace where, okay, well, companies can do that. You can go over and you could take advantage of slave labor in other countries. Go right ahead, I suppose. But if you have a free market, then you also have, I presume, an internet that is completely free, right? I mean, if you do it the right way, you first have to take ICANN back. And that Bobo bullshit where he gave the internet to the world, whatever the hell that means, and you put the internet, that is United States property, that belongs to the American citizens, that belongs to us, frankly. The internet does. The internet as a whole, as an idea, and it works. That's us. We paid for that. Okay, Americans paid for that probably 400 times over. Who knows how much we actually paid for all that shit over the course of years? So you put that back. And then you put it back under the Constitution where it belongs, and then you have a truly free and open internet where there's no censorship of any kind, like for real, any kind of censorship, zero. Okay, I mean, if you can imagine such a place, right? And then companies are free to do that, but then other people are free to do videos like this and say, hey, I don't want to support that company because you know what, I don't agree with them going over some other country and enslaving a whole bunch of brown people to get them to make a bunch of shit that for dirt cheap. I don't want to support that. I'd rather support local people. That is how a free market functions. There used to be tariffs involved, okay, and those tariffs, of course, if you're doing your tariffs in hard currency, it goes back to the currency issue again. You're doing your tariffs in hard currency, then that changes the deal, because that means that these businesses have to actually be profitable, and most businesses now are not profitable. I'm not talking about some guy's backyard mechanic thing. I'm not talking about that. That can be a profitable thing because he's running it himself. But I mean, most of these giant companies are just money laundering operations nowadays. So your company actually has to be truly, 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 truly profitable. But can you compete with local people? Let me give you an example. I've worked several times in the past. I don't do this any longer and stuff, but I don't work a whole lot in manufacturing any longer. But in the past, I used to work in manufacturing. And one of the things that I understood is that, I could have stuff made here in the U.S. and it would cost a lot of money, right? I could have it made in China and it wouldn't cost as much, right? But if I wanted the same quality that I would get if I had it made here domestically, right, by machine shops here, the price is basically the same. By the time you pay for freight and all the bullshit that goes along with it, and all the middlemen that have to be involved to do all of that, by the time you do this, it's pretty much the same thing. You're just better off having it made here by people. You can call them up on the phone and say, hey, I have a problem with my product. Can you fix it? And actually, because there's a value to social trust there. There's a value to social cohesion that works with that in business. Anybody who's been in business for any length of time, they'll tell you that it was actually, that during COVID, for example, it was actually kind of cool that you could call up a company with a problem and like the owner would answer the phone. Or one of the higher ups, like seriously, like one of the executives at a major company. I can think of one off the top of my head. I'm not going to tell you the story, but like answered the phone, like actually answered the call, and they solve shit just instantly, like grease lightning, solve a problem. There is something to be said for that, right? As opposed to going through what we have right now, which is just a hellscape of voicemails and leave a message and then send an email and blah, 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 and no one ever gets anything fucking done. And anytime there's a problem, there's something's fucked up, right? Then nobody knows who did it. Nobody's responsible for anything. You can't find, like, it's just a fucking nightmare, okay? And many of us experience this. But I remember dealing with that kind of stuff, you know, during COVID, and I still deal with all that, and have for years, because just from business side, right? And when you deal with that stuff enough, you start to realize just how much time you spend trying to solve like really fucking simple problems. And that becomes an issue, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess to your question, could people do that in a completely free market? I'm sure they could. But if you had an actual proper free market, then those, you know, you could bring prices down here as well, right? Because there's no shortage of people here to do all that work, even machine work. I know machinists, okay? Even electrical, plumbing, you name it. There's plenty of people in the US that can do all of this shit. All the infrastructure is still here, crumbling, but it's still here. And people, for the time being, still know how to do some of this shit. So I would suggest to you that if you take out all of the 70 to 90% of all of the bullshit that goes to a bunch of bankers, brokers, boomers in terms of their 401ks and all that bullshit, if you got rid of all that nonsense and all the fucking politicians, you get rid of all that shit, prices pretty much come crashing down to where, like, you can have everything made here, and it would be probably cheaper and probably a lot easier too. I mean, my God, I mean, think about it. Like, dude, you can go right now. If you have a place to do it, which is why they're absorbing real estate, by the way. That is the real reason they're trying to absorb as much real estate as they can and not have people, you know, spreading out and being on like 1 or 2 acres or even 5 acres or something like that, and building a 40 by 60 shop and actually deciding, you know what, screw it. Now that I've got the space to do something like this, I can put in a CNC table. I can put in, you know, I mean, like, dude, you can go on YouTube and there's guys who show you how to build that shit, not that expensive, in your own goddamn garage. Do you really think they want to compete with that? None of these manufacturers want to compete with that. They don't want to compete with some guy out in his shop with virtually no overhead, right? Especially if you own your property. They don't want to compete with that because they can't. And you can make a better product, right? Remember, I mean, you know, the goal is to have prices going up and the quality going to shit. That's the goal of bankers, corporate America, government, all of it. That's all these people that are involved. That's the goal. The goal for all of us is to try and get the prices to go down and the quality go up. So I hope that somewhat answers the question. But I mean, I realize I'm a little circuitous when I do this kind of stuff, but it's like there's a lot going on with it. It's not as cut and dry as that. To frame it as, you know, like, well, like now sort of like yes, you can, but would you? Because I know how competitive I can be. If we actually have if we had a hard currency, I know exactly how competitive I could be. I'd run circles around almost every Fortune 500 company out there. Absolutely. Just because I know how to, I know how to hire people who, you know, can do shit and give them authority to actually fix shit instead of going through 400 layers of bullshit, you know, and then having to worry about the fucking HR departments and all that nonsense. So anyway, hope that answers your question.